Hey guys, I had so much fun restoring my first tandem set. I want to dive right into another one. This one I got from an online friend who knew I was into these sets and I was working on some. So he had one, no CRT, no cable, just the box and the chassis, and a partial set of legs. So I had a set that had suffered some damage, so between the two I'm going to make one complete set. So these are the legs from my other set. I refinished them, but they don't look so good with this cabinet. The other cabinet had real mahogany veneer and I refinished it. And I used red cherry mahogany toner lacquer, whereas I think I really should use brown mahogany. And I still haven't decided for sure which cabinet I want to use, because I got two cabinets. I got the other one I refinished with the real veneer, and then I've got this one with this faux, whatever, acrylic, some sort of weird, funky imitation mahogany finish. So you can see this is kind of brownish looking, and the legs are red, so not a good look. Anyways, that can wait while I get this thing working. I looked at the reference photos I took when I first got this set. I think I did a video on it. I'll try to remember to put a link to it. Or actually, I guess I'll put this video in the same series with my work on that other set. If you watch them in order, the video before this one should be the one where I got this set. I took a look at it. I looked at my reference photos I took when I first got it, and it's actually the identical revision to the one that I just restored. It's really why I want to work on it right now while it's fresh in my mind. I got the other chassis still out. I can compare them side by side. I don't believe any work has been done on this one as well, but it's a little bit rougher. I think some tubes are missing, and it's like a little bit dirtier and rustier. So I'll grab a nut driver, take out these 3 screws, and pop this thing out. So here they are side by side. Still with a little bit of work left to do on this one. I want to put the original tuner back into it and place the power switch. I'm waiting for a new one to arrive, and while I wait for that, I want to get started on this. This has the remains of the original antenna in it, which is better than nothing, but you can see the tube got destroyed. Might be possible to salvage this if I can take this apart and replace the rod and ball there with something else. There's some hope for that. Having the antennas is a real nice touch. Makes the sets look extra cool, I think. And so you can see the corrosion I was talking about, like on these tube shields here, on the top of this box. I will put my Evapor-Rust to work on that. There's the main board. Like I said, no work has been done. Nothing's been replaced. Tubes have, though. See, that's a Westinghouse. But some of these are still Philcos. That's a Philco, that's a Philco. That's a Westinghouse. Take a look in here. Well, it actually looks to be in better shape than the one I was just working on. Same deal, copper heat sink. Let's see if this one's got a rusty splotch on the side. No, it doesn't. The other one I worked on, right opposite the flyback, which I imagine it's kind of warm, was a big rust splotch on the inside of the high voltage box. Not on this one. So the coating on this one is actually so good, I don't think I'll mess with it. I don't see any evidence. Well, there's a little bit of stuff down at the bottom, but nowhere near as much melted off wax as on the one I was just working on. So I might just leave that alone for now. See, this has a different kind of fusible resistor. Maybe these are original. I don't know. It probably is. I think that's a Philco part number. Huh. It's a nice touch. This one I replaced. That guy. Alright, so I'll clean off my workbench so I got some room to work, and take a look underneath the chassis, and then just dive right into taking out this board and start restuffing it. Here's a look underneath, and right away I notice that this cap is oozing, so not a good sign. And the wiring is not all sticky, ooey gooey like it was on the other set. So I won't have to spend any time with Q-tips and alcohol cleaning that gunk off. Same revision though, because you see it has just the one cap here. The other revision has two high voltage ceramic disc caps here and a power resistor. Still has the original thermistor, and it's a first. It's fallen out of every other Predicta that I've looked at so far. And here's a filament dropper. This one looks really green and corroded, so I really suspect that that's bad. Actually, this one is a little bit different than the other, because it has two caps here, whereas the other set had the single cap, or rather had a dual cap in place of these two individuals. And this cup plate is a little bit different. It's smaller. It might be a different model. So I guess they're not exactly identical, but otherwise pretty darn close. I just finished unwrapping the 20 or so little wires that attach to the main board, and I have unmounted it so I can start working on it. Chassis is in really fine condition, just like the last set I worked on. No corrosion, which is nice. And like I said before, these wires are not sticky. Maybe that's just a matter of the environment it was stored in. I don't know, but I'm glad. And I did clean them off just with a little bit of window cleaner and a rag, and then I took my reference photos so I could see the colors more clearly, which will help me reattach them. So let's take a look at the board. Now, at first glance, these tube sockets look okay. These can be troublemakers. If you watch my series on the Predicta Holiday, two of mine had cracked contacts in them, and I ended up replacing all of them. But these look okay, so I think I might just leave them alone. Otherwise, the board looks fine. No cracks or lifted traces or anything. So I will just start clipping and snipping and replace all the parts. Replace all these bumblebee caps for sure, and this one mica cap, because I've read several sources that it's a troublemaker. And likewise this K network, I think has the highest failure rate, because it, along with this cap, is part of the vertical oscillator, and there's a pretty healthy spike that goes through these. It's over 1,000 volts, and they can start breaking down, I guess. And I'll replace I'll shotgun all the resistors and the K networks too. Overkill, I suspect. These K networks, other than maybe these two, are probably okay. I've seen plenty of other guys who have restored these, just left them alone, but I've got the hang of it. I've got the parts. It doesn't take that long, so why not? Well, I've got the board out. Likewise, the resistors. By the time you lift up one leg, test the resistor, might as well just replace them. Resistors cost just a few pennies each. Why not? Okay, I have finished replacing all the caps and resistors that I am going to. I'll leave the ceramics alone. Never found one that's gone bad yet. And I removed all the K networks. There are 5 of them, so I want to start rebuilding these. First one I want to do is this guy. This is the vertical integrator network. It goes right there. That is the tricky one. That's one that confuses a lot of people because of the way they portray it in the schematic. See, the internals of all these networks are shown in the schematic. So it's really no challenge to reverse engineer them. They're the things inside these dashed lines. So there's what they call the N3 network. There's the part number. And inside those dashed lines, those are the parts. And you see they have the leads there numbered with the little circles. What they don't show you, though, is the wattage and the voltage ratings and what materials they used. Well, I have dissected a bunch of these. Now that I've got a lot from the various sets I've taken apart and restored, like the Holiday and the other Tandem. So I got a lot of these networks. Also the Town and Country I worked on. And I determined that they are carbon composition resistors and ceramic capacitors. More clearly visible in this guy, which is new old stock. It's never used. It's from a Town and Country, so slightly later than this, but same deal, it just has a different coating on it. Those white tubes, those are the capacitors. Very similar to the caps that were inside the video IF cans in the Dumont RA113 I restored recently, where it's a ceramic tube, the inside is conductive, and the outside, they dip in a conductive solution. The more coating you put on, or the farther down the coating goes, the more capacitance you get. And I imagine they have different types of ceramic materials, different wall thicknesses, different dielectric strengths to get the different values. Alright, so in the past I was a little more paranoid than I think I needed to be with what I chose to use. So I used a lot of mica caps and some really high voltage large caps, like 2000 volt cap here. Nothing wrong with that. It'll work fine. Sure, use mica caps for all of them. Knock yourself out. But they are kind of expensive. They are kind of big. Similarly for the resistors, I'm just going to use all half watts. I know some guys use 1 watts or bigger. Again, no problem. Go ahead. Work fine. So when I say I think I was being too paranoid or whatever, not only in the wattage and the voltage ratings and the type of materials, but also even the values. Some of these are a little oddball. Like they might have been 5,000 picofarad, not a standard value these days, but 4,700 is. I think that will work just fine. Tolerance on these, I'm sure, was not better than 10%. 5,000 picofarad cap, 10% tolerance. It could be between 4,500 and 5,500 and still be good. Get yourself 4,700 with 5% tolerance, you'll be fine. So, type of materials. If I went with ceramic, pretty much all I'm going to use these little blue guys. 630 volt caps, and they're all C0G type ceramic. That is the most temperature stable. These barely vary over their entire operating temperature range. More common type ceramics, like the ones actually they used on these boards, you see like a Z5U. I can't recall off the top of my head what the other common types are, but they're like this X55. I think there's also like an X75 or something like that, or Z5U. Those all vary, like plus 80%, minus 20% over a temperature range. That could be terrible in oscillator circuits. So set heats up, the frequency will drift all over the place, or the sync will drift all over the place. So you want to go with these. And look how friggin' small these things are. So there's just what I was talking about, the 4,700 picofarad. So instead of using something like a film cap, like this is what I think I used in the other set. 512, so it's 5100. And I used that for the 5000 picofarad cap. Now I'm going to use these blue guys. So in other words, my network's going to be really small. I wouldn't, if I was going to do a whole bunch of these, I would go so far probably as to have some printed circuit boards made actually. But I'll just use perf board like I have before. So I got as many as I could in these blue guys. Some of them had to go with a little bit larger disc, and they're one or two values, like really small picofarad values. I'm still going to use mica. Now I got this big pile here because these are also for a Princess Predicta and a Siesta Predicta and one other tandem set, so I ordered parts for all of them. I should mention that there is one spot where you do want to use a high voltage cap. Vertical feedback here. C1 is an external capacitor. It's this guy right here. And I used a 2000 volt cap there, so overkill, but doesn't hurt. Now that attaches to another 1500 cap inside the network that goes to ground. So those are forming a capacitive divider off the plate of the vertical output tube. So C1 inside that network, I would go with at least 1000 volt cap. So that's what these are for. 1500 or 1500 picofarad cap, 1000 volt. Alright, so I'd mentioned there was one oddball network that throws people off. That's this guy, vertical integrator. So, a couple capacitors over here, a couple resistors, no big deal. Then what is this? 90K and 0.004, long squiggle and then a line going to ground. What that is this network is formed with like early hybrid thick film technology where they actually used a ceramic substrate and deposited some metallic and some carbon elements. I scraped one of them away. I show it in the holiday restoration series. I don't think I still have the pieces of it anymore. So they were able to effectively like wrap a capacitor around a resistor, like a distributive capacitance over a resistive area. Well, not something you can really fabricate accurately yourself, so don't even bother trying. But if you've seen other TVs circuits before, they all have vertical integrators, but they build them like this. Discrete resistors and capacitors, typically 3 caps, 2 resistors. So that's what you can do with this. Only thing you want to do is get the time constant about the same. So if you multiply 90,000 by 0.004, you get 360. So when I did this previously, I used 2 47Ks and 2 1200s and a 1600. Which was kind of, again, just being overly cautious. I wanted to get exactly 4,000 picofarad or 0.004, but that's, I don't think, really necessary. Plus, that's 376 if you multiply those values out. So this time around, I want to simplify things a little, so I went with 3 1500 picofarad and 2 39Ks, and then you get 351, so which is actually closer to 360 than 376 with my other design. And instead of that 5,000, 4,700. So here it is. Here's the parts. Here's the 3 1500s, the 4700, the 150 picofarad, and the various resistors. So I just need to assemble those on a perf board and just get the leads right so that it will fit into the board. So spaced about like that. For the component, or for the leads that go into the board, I just got some solid bust wire, so I'll cut off 3 lengths of this, stick them through some holes, and then just start laying out these parts and tack them together however I can manage, and then I will seal the whole thing in 2-part epoxy and then paint it. Again, totally unnecessary. I've seen guys build these in free space, no coating, no perf board. I'm sure they work just fine. I just like doing it. I have a background building models when I was a kid and a teenager, and I kind of treat these things as much as electrical restorations as I do building models. Well, here's what I came up with for laying out the components on the perf board and soldering them together. Pretty straightforward. The three 1500 picofarads of these over here, 239Ks, they correspond to these two guys. There's the 4700, there's the 150, there's the 10K, and the 33K. And by the way, I made a mistake earlier. I had 39K in that resistor. It should be 33K. And it's pretty close to the original size. I probably could have done a better job, but I wasted a bit of space down at the bottom by taking that bus wire and looping it through a couple holes to give it more strength, but it'll fit on the board just fine. It'll stick up a little bit taller than the original. No big deal, so it goes in right like that. And yeah, there's a tube next to it, so I'll bend it back to get it away from the heat a little bit. I suppose I could have put the components on the other side, but I really don't think it's that big of an issue. So, one down, four to go. 3 networks down, 2 more to go. So they turned out nice and compact using those ceramic caps. These have been encased in epoxy, and I will paint them after they cure up a bit longer. And right now I'm working on the next one. So here's a little brief overview of how I've been making these. This is part number 306512-7, which I think is a horizontal oscillator. Yeah, I got it written down right there. So by studying the pin layouts and the schematic, which clearly shows how all the parts are laid out, it's this guy right in here. I laid out the components this way so it matches up with the pinouts here. Pins 1 through 7, pins 5 and 6 are omitted, so here's the pins here. And I laid out the parts as seemed the most logical way to do to minimize the runs. So like the 4.7K resistor here terminates at pin 1. I'll put it right next to pin 1, so kind of like to have them here. These are the individual components inside here. Tubular resistors and capacitors. So I'm going to lay it out the same way on the perf board. Got my resistors and capacitors, and I'll bend the leads over and put them in here vertically, just as it's laid out here. And then a lot of the wires I can just bend over the component leads and tack them in place. And for the longer ones, like going from pin 2 all the way over to here, I'll use a little jumper wire, insulated if need be. Now for the leads that actually go into the board, if you look closely here, you see they're staggered. It's even more obvious if you look at the circuit board. You can see that the holes are offset. So I could put all the leads on one side of the board and bend and twist them around, but instead what I've been doing is just taking some pieces of bus wire and bending a little loop in the end, and then sticking it through 2 holes in the perf board and bending them over. So I'll just alternate them. So the last one, or the first one rather, I put in that way, which will be, build this thing going this way. So that one's on top. So the next one I will insert from the top. Lead spacing on these matches up pretty well too, so you just use every other hole on the perf board. So the next one will go right here. And when I push it down and bend it over, it'll end up coming over on the other side. So when I'm done, some of the leads will be bent over on the bottom side, some bent over on the top side. And then when I put in my resistors and capacitors, I'll just tack solder them onto the stub of the lead there. I'll try to get some of this on camera. Kind of hard to keep things in frame while I'm working, but I'll give it a shot. So I just installed the second one. I'll go for the third. So this one should come up from the bottom. through and then just bend it over. Just need those pliers to mash it down real good. And bend over this little stub. When I did these earlier, I just used the resistor leads. So I'd stick the resistor in there. Problem is, well, it's not really a problem, but these resistors have pretty thin leads. It's pretty thin gauge wire. They're very flexible. So what would happen is the networks, when you install them on the board, if you just bump into them, they could bend over pretty easily, kind of flopping around. Especially the ones that only have, say, 3 wires coming out of them, like this guy's only 3 leads. So 3 little small gauge wires, not that stable. So this is, oh, I don't know, at least twice the thickness, twice the gauge of this stuff. So that's why I switched to using it. Alright, so that's 3. Next one. I just realized I actually screwed up on that second one. I went over one more lead than I should have. Or one more hole, rather. It'll work fine. It just not exactly what I meant to do. I guess I could take it off and move it over. Alright, so that's 4, and now we do the final one right here. Alright, so now I will take my little parts and lay them out just like I have here, and make sure I get the right way, so it should be like this. And let's see, parts should go onto the other side of the board, so the parts will go in from the side. Pin 1, 4.7K. It's already bent over. So this side, so it will go right here. Like so. And then I just take this lead here, and I'll solder, put a solder blob right there. Cut off the excess. That's really all there is to it. And then when it's completely done, just break this apart. It's pretty easy. Just use cutters like this and go along the holes. It can be a little tricky when you get to, you know, in the interior here, so a little file. You can kind of score this. It snaps it apart more easily. Here are the rest of the components going in. There's 39K. Now some of the capacitors. And these things are small. But there are numbers pointed on, or printed on them rather. Be kind of hard to see though, so I keep a there's a little LED flashlight. It's handy. So, for example, this is a 1000 picofarad cap. Let's see if my camera will even focus on it. So there is a 1002J on there. 1002 means 1 and 0, and then add 2 more zeros. So there's a 3300 that'll be marked 332. The 330 picofarad will be labeled 331, so on. Standard for capacitors has been for a long time, like this. 202. Come on, focus. That means it is 2000 picofarads. Focus better if I shine light on it. Got the camera in zoom mode. It's something I don't do too often, and this is kind of why. It just doesn't like to focus on anything. Probably the white background doesn't help either. Anyways, so 1000 again. Alright, so put that right here. These stick up a little bit, so I've been trying to fold them over and bend them over a little when possible. Let's see, next to that goes some other caps. I'll finish putting them in, then I'll bend them over. Next to the 1200. It's this guy. $330. And finally the 3300. So I can kind of bend these over a little bit like that. So it's pretty flat, pretty low profile. Alright, now it's just a matter of flipping it over and following my wiring diagram and getting these things connected properly. And there's the final wiring. This one is actually quite easy to do, not a single wire crosses. I just had to bend over some leads here and there, tack them together. I just had to add one extension lead over here, and that's it. Alright, now I just need to cut it out. So, let's see, the original came out to, let's go here. I'll score this a little bit and make it easier. And going this way. Let's see. Guess this will be good enough. Tip on this file got bent a little bit, so it's giving me some trouble. Alright, so I got one more to do, then I'll mix up some epoxy and coat those two. We'll let them cure up overnight and then paint them. I just finished the last of the networks. This one was also quite easy to lay out and solder together. No jumpers required. Alright, so I now want to coat these two. I'm just using cheapo 5-minute quick set epoxy. Mix them up using an empty CD jewel case. Just finished replicating the last of the networks. This was as easy as the last one I did. Very easy to wire all the components together once you lay them out like so. No jumpers or anything required. Just kind of route the wires like that. Alright, so now I want to encapsulate these in epoxy so they come out like that. Using Loctite 5-minute quick set epoxy. I like to use old CD jewel cases to mix my epoxy up, so squirt some out in here, mix it up with just a scrap piece of wood, and then slobber it on. I'll just do one at a time. Got to work too fast to try to do more than one at a time, and smear it around, and then just kind of keep moving it like this so that it doesn't start dripping off. And after a couple minutes, it gets thick enough that I can just stick it in a hunk of foam over here while it sets up. Oh, might as well get this on film too, since I've recorded the rest of the process. So let's do the bigger guy first. I'm running low on epoxy. I hope I got enough to do these last two. So there's a dual plunger. One side's the resin, one side's the hardener. You want to get equal amount of each. And since I've done a few of these, I got a pretty good idea how much I need. That should be enough. Good. I like to keep mixing it up and take my time. There's no sense in putting it on really quick onto this because it's just going to be running all over. So wait till it sets up a bit harder than that. Looks like I finally hit the point where the epoxy is set up pretty hard. In fact, I can feel these wires getting kind of warm. Epoxies must be giving us some heat. I hadn't noticed that before. So I'll give it another minute or so, then I can set this one aside and coat the other one. After the epoxy cured overnight, I painted these with some Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer, which is a darn good color match and sheen match. Nice satin dull kind of finish to it. So I'm going to pop these in the board, and that's it for this sweep and sync and audio board. I'll pop it back into the chassis and then flip it over and start working on the underside. Fortunately, just like the previous tandem I restored, this chassis is virtually rust free. Been brushing off some of the dirt, and you can see all down in here it's all nice and corrosion free, but a little bit in this area. So I'm cleaning that off with some navel jelly before I put the board on, which will cover that area over. And I'm doing a little test spot here on the high voltage cover, which is pretty rusty. And as are the tuner tube shields. Just on the top surface though, not on the underside. So I don't know what it was, but just the top of this and the top of these two tube shields got rusty. I think this is just dirty, no rust. So I want to remove the rust from these as well, but they're held on with little ground straps, so I'm going to have to heat up that solder joint to remove these, and I guess I'll just pop them in some Evapo rust. Now I can see that there's a Philco tube on this side and a Westinghouse on the other, and yes, I will put the right tubes back into the right spot before I try powering this set up. It's so aggravating when I think back on that previous tandem. If I had had the right tubes and the right sockets, on the very first power-up, that set would have worked just fine. Oh well, lesson learned. Hopefully this set will work perfectly the very first time I power it up. Alright, finished up with this board, reinstalled it. I'm trying to gloss over as much as possible. I don't want to keep going over the same old ground that I've gone over in other videos, so just trying to pick out the highlights. So done with this side, I'm going to flip it over and start working on the underside. This filament dropping resistor looks pretty miserable, but what the heck, let's measure it anyways. Regardless of how it checks out, I do expect I'll replace it. Huh, I think it actually is still okay. This should be about 8 ohms. That has a jumper. If you recall, I mentioned in the earlier restoration that some sets will have a jumper wire shorting out this 8 ohm section, and there'll typically be a sticker on the back of the set, and I don't recall seeing one on this set, and it'll say that this set has been modified to use a replacement CRT because the original went bad. The originals ran on a 2.35 volt filament, the replacements ran on 6.3, so they shorted out a section of the filament dropper. But amazingly, the other sections on this do seem to be okay. Should be around 12 or 13, 14. Should be, that's hard to say because there's a light bulb in parallel with it, but yeah, this actually does seem to be okay. Huh. Alright, now how about this thermistor over here, which appears to be an original. Should be 400 ohms cold, and I think around 11 hot. So since this is pretty cool, it should be around 400. Or even higher, 677, so I think that actually might be okay too. Wouldn't be surprised though if after running for a little while it would fail. I guess for the time being I'll leave it in there. Why not? See how it works out. I actually have a replacement I found with some new old stock parts. Not quite the same though. The original would be a 1343-11, which would be the hot resistance. This is a -17. So in other words, when this reached operational temperature, and it's even got 17 right on it, this would have more resistance than the original did. Which you might want. Line voltage is a little bit higher now. You might want to run the CRT filament a little bit cooler anyways to prolong its life. And cold, yes, 400 and change, so I bet this would work fairly well in this set. Now, that's, that's assuming it would hold up, because this is quite old as well. And I expect I'll put a modern replacement in there at some point. Alright, so as for the rest of it, same old, exactly the same underside as the last one I did. Get rid of all the paper caps, the bumblebees, the electrolytics. I'll restuff these two guys, and the one that goes through the other side, replace the power resistors, and I don't see any other strange things in this set so far, so just replace all this stuff, and then be ready for our first power up. Hang on, there's actually one more thing I want to test, and that's good old push-on, push-off power switch, which was bad in both the Holiday and the previous Tandem. So, well, what are the odds in the third set that it would be bad as well? Let's see. Hey, look at that. This one might actually have a little life left. How about that?